Happy Friday. Today is May 15th. My name is Jay Leask, and this is This Week in Teams.
Hey, I'm Craig Jenke. I'm here with Jay. Happy to see you again, Jay. We're halfway through May.
Yeah, it's been crazy how much time has passed. Sorry about last week with the Mother's Day celebrations and work and just the general craziness. That did not work out.
Yeah, I think everybody was a little busy last week. A lot of people doing a lot of things. I know I was swamped with work. I did a couple of workshops, doing training, and then trying to squeeze in the Mother's Day stuff and all that. Even if you couldn't get out and do a whole lot of stuff, it's still, I don't know, the time has just been going. And I think I was explaining to one of my people, I've been doing like these online workshops for everybody, and working from home is good, but when you're presenting all day, it just wears you at the end of the day. So I
It
don't know
does.
why, but
It does.
you don't
Working
get
from
that
home is,
break. You don't get that really.
yeah. Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say working from home is good, but then again, you forget to, like, I don't know, do something with your hair and record a podcast, and now your hair's all over the place. Well, at least mine is.
Uh, Now you get the
No,
look.
what's that?
You get the sexy hair going.
Is that what this is? Thanks, Craig. All right. Anyway,
Or
on
the
to
bad
teams.
pay. On to teams. What's new in teams this week? What do you want to talk about first?
Well, actually, you'll notice this week has been pretty quiet as far as I could tell. I know there's a few things, but so with last week missing, there's a couple of items I wanted to talk about that actually were from last week. I'm going to go backwards in our list. The first thing I want to talk about is the Microsoft NFL draft use case. I thought that was really interesting. Craig, did you get a chance to see any of the draft?
Yeah, I watched some of it. My team, the Bears, didn't have a pick in the first round, so I kind of skipped out on
Oh,
that day. But no, I thought it was pretty cool how they were doing from home. They were
yes.
using Teams. They were using the video. They set up private channels for each of the teams to be in. I thought it was actually cool for a lot of them where they just had their home with their family and get the full reaction of everybody who was in the area, and that and a little bit more that you don't normally see because they just bring some people to New York, but they were doing a lot more people, right, who were being drafted. And it was nice to see where the coaches lived. I
Yeah.
saw the Bears, like he was drafted from his basement guy. So,
Oh, interesting.
and yeah, so that was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Bill Belichick posted a picture of his dog sitting at his computer instead of him, which there was questions of whether or not the dog was doing the picking for the Patriots, but that's a different story. Yeah, it was interesting. What I really liked about this use case, so if you look at the power of Office 365, not just Microsoft Teams, as you mentioned, they use private channels for each team within a Microsoft team. Each NFL team had a private channel, and then they were brought in as external guests. So we've had this discussion before. There is guest access, there is external access, and then there is SharePoint external sharing, all of which can affect the accessibility to your environment, right?
Yeah, cool.
In this case, guest access being a user in Microsoft Teams, you did not pay for their license. Their license is either they came in with bringing their own O365 license or whatever. But so that was the first thing I thought that was interesting. So they didn't have to set up each user as
Right,
a tenant user. They invited them from external email addresses, and then they used forms
right, right.
to gather the
Take
picks.
their
And yep, and then they use Power Automate to push the response of that form to the commissioner, who was then able to announce the picks. Thought that was really interesting that they used everything across the board there.
Yeah. And I know that it wasn't something that was just thrown up overnight too. I mean, they spent a lot of time preparing that. A lot of people were working on that, and that was actually a couple month process. So,
Yeah,
it was, obviously something that they saw with the whole, COVID work from home thing being pushed out, that it was like a contingency plan, right? So maybe they even had that in the works prior to this, but obviously some good planning on the NHL and some, working with Microsoft and just making sure they had all their ducks in a row and rolled out a really seamless operation. I think a lot of people enjoyed it. Everybody wants to be there in person, but what can you do?
sure, sure. Yeah, it'll be in. I've said this a million times. It will be interesting to see coming out of this spring into the summer, as we go. Hopefully, as we start to see ourselves go back to more of the new normal. It'll be interesting to see what that new normal is. Does the NFL take what they learned here and institute that as part of their draft process going forward? Maybe not the full thing, but parts of it.
I
In your work scenarios, does your company take some of what they've instituted from a work from home scenario and implement that as part of their new normal too? So
Yeah, I've seen several organizations already tell their employees, hey, no rush to come back, right? As long as you're getting your work done. For the customers who aren't customer facing, obviously, and the back end workers and the knowledge workers, right? They've already told them, if you're in an area where you're high risk, your relatives are high risk, and you have concerns, take your time, even after
right.
the things lifted. It's not like they're going to say, okay, at the end of May, everybody's got to come back. So I
Yeah.
think they're being smart about it and trying to make sure that they do it, because a lot of companies have found out that their workers can be productive at home.
Yes, they have.
Yes.
I actually had a conversation last week. I did a webinar with an organization called ARMA up in the Connecticut chapter of ARMA. It's a records and information management and information governance professional organization. And part of the conversation we had was, you know, for the many people who are doing something new, how do they evaluate what they've been doing and make sure that where they can go back to how they used to do it, they then capture the changes, and where they have to change how they do things going forward, how do they make sure that they're successful with it. And one of the things that we talked about was making sure that you document as much as you can. Even as
Yes.
an end user, I've changed how I do X, Y, and Z, and it's important to document that, because 6 months from now, if you're trying to remember what you did when this all first started, and I know this isn't necessarily a Teams conversation, but let's say you're moving to Teams. Well, how did you structure that team and the document library within it, right? That's something you should have a conscious thought about, but that's
Right.
another conversation.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
digress.
So what we're doing, yeah, but to go along with that, I mean, from what I have been doing mostly in my work, is there's been a lot of teams that rush to go to a lot of companies that rush to go to Teams. They needed to. So now what we're doing is, they put it up in what I would call restrictive mode, right? They wanted to make sure that
Yep.
information wasn't going out, but now we're taking a look at going, okay, what are governance best practices and how do we get more use out of our system? And let's talk about that external access and guest sharing and those kind of things, which actually, it's been good for them. So they're learning more. They're planning for a time when, they're planning to keep their data safe, get the most value out of their system, but, still keep an eye on people will probably still want to work from home, at least
Yep.
part-time when they do that. And I'm going to segue into a little thing, but part of along with that comes sensitivity labels that were just released as generally available, um, as far as governing your data, right? So that
Yes.
was just became generally available in Office 365, which of course affects Teams. Before we were using classification labels, and those were kind of off by themselves, but sensitivity labels are now more a one-to-one correlation and can work with Azure information protection, right? So the same
Yep.
labels can work across both places. So kind of some consistency there. I think we're eventually going to push that into the Office 365 stack and manage that solely in the Security and Compliance Center. But one of the nice things about when you do the sensitivity labels is you can publish them out and have them applied to your different sites, your teams, and you can start labeling them internal only. So you may have global sharing on with Teams and allow people as guest access, but now with sensitivity labels, I can call it internal only site and limit who I'm doing with that, which hasn't always been the easiest thing to do. Um,
Yeah.
do now. It's been an on or not, right? Unless you're doing
Yep.
some PowerShell and trying to figure out how to turn off adding guests to a group. So a little bit easier to do that. So that's coming, and then you can work with some of your retention and DLP rules and things like that to better safeguard your data and make sure that it's being classified the right way, sensitive, highly sensitive, internal only, available for external. And then, like I said, works with retention rules. So you can set a retention label 2 on a document so that we're,
Yep.
determining how long we should keep it and making sure we're not keeping things that we don't want to keep. And then, coupled with the sensitive information types in DLP to make sure that certain data isn't going out the door that we don't want to go out and without noting. So just cool stuff there.
Yeah, the inclusion of sensitivity labels to Microsoft Teams is huge. They are, for those of you who were not aware, they originally rolled out with the classification schema, but it really didn't do anything. It was something that the admins could set up. It would display the classification is, sensitive or foo or whatever the IT administrator set up. But beyond that, it didn't integrate with the rest of Office 365. So these sensitivity label general availability is going to be huge. Unfortunately, for those of you who are on the government cloud in the US, that has not rolled out there yet. GCC, GCC High, and DoD networks don't have that yet. But it's the fact that it's out there it's going to be a big change a valuable change when it comes.
Yes, so that's pretty cool.
Craig, you also since we bounced around, you also had advanced eDiscovery there. I think it kind of ties in a little bit from a at least similar topic. You want to talk about the eDiscovery stuff that's coming?
Yeah, so advanced eDiscovery. So we have core eDiscovery, which is basically just putting holds on certain people. And hold on their mailbox, hold on the teams, hold on the SharePoints that they are. So taking a snapshot of where they are now and making sure that data gets preserved in case of a legal or compliance need, right? So you can put a hold, you can do a search, and you can export those reports, which works for a lot of companies, but some companies need more stuff and deeper searching availability. So we have advanced eDiscovery, which has ability to manage custodians, just communications with that. You can segregate the searches out a little bit better. It does more automated searching for where people can have locations, so it'll find the teams for you. But one of the things about that has been a feature is adding the custodian. So you're basically saying, who do I want to put the hold on, right? So up until now, you either had to do that with PowerShell or you had to add them individually, which isn't necessarily the best solution for the IT teams that want to give that to the legal team to do, because most legal teams don't know PowerShell, and adding those people can take a lot of time. So my customer, who I was teaching this to, said, well, why, it really is nice, but we need the ability to bulk upload. So like an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file. Just happened to be, I checked the roadmap, and that day was posted that is a feature that's in development and should be rolling out sometime in summer. So Q2, Q3 time. I never like to give specific dates on that, but that should be rolling out. Also underneath that, there's going to be coming out, this is more later in the year, but a bunch of APIs, the graph for advanced eDiscovery. So being able to create cases, to add custodians, searches, do all of that stuff programmatically, which has been limited till now. So some big announcements for advanced eDiscovery. So I would say by the end of the year, that should be a pretty powerful tool for a lot of our organizations who do more with advanced eDiscovery than your typical organizations. So like your financial institutions and legal firms and things like that. The company I was talking to was in the construction, so they have a lot of construction projects and a lot of contracts and things like that could go sideways, or just have a lot of legal matters going on at one time. So they were very interested in it. So some cool things coming with advanced eDiscovery.
That will be huge. I know that the more I talk to prospects of both AvePoint and Microsoft Office 365 and those holding off on Teams, the eDiscovery, the ability to manage records properly, these are all things that are big roadblocks for large organizations. Anything that relates to the regulatory controls that they may have. So it's having a big block of features like this come out is huge. So I
Yeah,
definitely look forward
especially
to
like
sharing
you
that
said,
one.
not only going to Teams, but going to the cloud in general is where some of
Yep.
them have stuck because they have their homegrown systems, or they're using a third party that can scan a file share pretty easily, or scan an email. It's this adding this other feature to SharePoint Online and Teams Online and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
pretty excited about
absolutely.
it just because I've been doing some projects in that space. So that's pretty cool.
So talking about the the how you can do things programmatically, moving into the interface, the admin interface. You brought up that the external sharing in SharePoint that I mentioned previously is something that's been in the classic admin panel, but not the modern admin panel. So you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so the modern SharePoint admin panel is you have the ability now to kind of limit sharing on groups. So
Mm-hmm.
by group, it was something that was kind of hidden and you had to go to the classic admin panel to find, but you could still kind of do it. So it is now, and we will have a screenshot on our blog post when we put this out. But it's cool. It gives you a little bit more control over who you're sharing with. So that would be
Right.
in the sharing part under both OneDrive and SharePoint. So while Teams well, it doesn't really affect Teams as in being able to add a guest so that they can be able
Right.
to um, communicate with you, right, and do channel messages and that kind of thing. You can actually backdoor limit sharing files with those people. Not sure why you would want to do that, but that is something you may want to do. But again, it's more to do files. So like
Yeah.
OneDrive or SharePoint, if you set up a separate site that's not attached to a team that you want to limit who can share
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, that's part of what I mentioned earlier, the external access versus guest access versus external sharing. External sharing, there is that little trick where if guest access is turned off in Teams, you can still share files in SharePoint, turning on external sharing. There's more. I've got more on that on a blog I wrote recently. I'll link to that. But it is definitely good that they're pushing this more to the surface. And clearly they want people to use the modern panel for administration. Pushing this in there is going to be very good.
Yeah.
We've talked about it
So
week
you want
after
to
week.
talk about?
Go ahead,
Go
Craig.
ahead. I was gonna say, should we go to about week after week, but we both on the same page, just like we're mind melded. I don't know.
Not in a good way. So week after week, we've mentioned the Brady Bunch View. It is rolling out in the wild. You'll see screenshots of it all over the place. That is the 3 people across, 3 people down, 9 people on a screen max for video conferencing. It's still not quite as powerful as Zoom's, which I think you can get like 40 on a screen. But I will say, it's rolled out in our tenant, and what I've been interested by is how it transitions from 4 to 9 as more people join in. So you end up with you have your 2x2, and then it adds one more in a column. So you have 3
Yeah.
columns across with only 2 each in the first 2 columns. And then it makes it 6 with 3x2, so 3 across and 2 rows. So it's just interesting to me how they've done that. Speaking of
So my
the
daughter
Brady
just ran
Bunch
in and
view,
told me that. Yeah, sorry.
that's
My
okay.
daughter
It's
just
okay.
rolled in and told me I have water in my basement, so it's been raining
Oh,
pretty heavy.
all right. Well, then let's wrap this up. we won't talk about that too much. 2 more updates. One, from if you were having problems on iOS last week with Microsoft Teams with dropped calls, Teams version 2.0.9 with the most recent iOS update was crashing. Dropped calls were happening. V 2.0.1 or .10 that is was submitted last week to the Apple Store, and that should fix the problem. So check your version in iOS if you're still having dropped calls, and if you're on the older version, make sure it gets updated. And then the last thing that I have in the notes here is there's a neat feature in Microsoft Stream. I've seen a lot in the forums out there. People want to be able to record something on their desktop, not necessarily a 2-person meeting, but just record something on their desktop. And exactly. And the solution has been for the longest time, go to your calendar, hit Meet Now, and just record from there. But Microsoft has pushed out a feature in Stream where you can record short videos, just yourself, your screen share, and your audio. The recording is automatically pushed into Microsoft Stream. I did see there was someone who was testing it had a problem with the automatic transcription. They were able to get it to trigger, but it didn't do it automatically. They had to go in and edit the video details. Anyway, I'm excited because Craig's volunteered to do a quick tip on this one. How he's going to record it, we haven't
I will
figured
be
out
working
yet,
on that video either later today or tomorrow. So
well, it depends on the
we'll
water in
get
your
something
basement.
out there. Yeah, I suppose it does.
All right. Well, Craig, listen, why don't unless you have anything else to add, why don't you go take care of the water in your basement, and we'll meet again next week.
All right, cool. Thanks. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Craig. Take care.
Bye. Bye.